Good morning, everybody. To those who are in person and to those folks who are online, this morning we'll be working on our ALICE presentation for the fall semester of 2023. I am your instructor, James Mariano. I'm the McKinley County Sheriff. For those of you that have trained with me before, you'll recognize some of the slides in here. We've changed up the presentation a little bit to reflect some of the new material that ALICE had to offer, which is going to talk about situational awareness and what to do in your particular environment. Today we'll also be going over the protocols for Gallup McKinley County Schools. To review those, they should be posted in your classrooms and in your schools. So we'll go over what each one of those means. So to start off this morning, we're going to take a look at a video that was made by the Sandy Hook Project. If you remember that active shooter incident back in 2012, that happened at an elementary school back east. And the shooter in that particular environment was the son of one of the teachers and knew the inside of the school environment well.
This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I needed for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
These scissors really come in handy in art class.
These colored pencils, too.
These new socks, they can be a real lifesaver.
I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
As we start off each semester, we try to keep in mind that anything could happen. We don't know when, we don't know where, and we don't know who the threat might be. Sandy Hook put this together years before the school district picked up the I Love You Guys Foundation, and something eerie that we found inside of this video is that as that young lady looks at her cell phone and she texts, "I love you, Mom," as the bad guy walks into the bathroom, the I Love You Guys Foundation, which is the protocol we're going to go over here in a few minutes, was started by parents, and those parents received a text message from their daughter inside of a school in Colorado on an active shooter situation. It was the last thing they ever heard from their daughter, and it was hugs, "I love you guys." So kind of eerie that this particular video displays that very thing that was going to happen several years later in a school in Colorado. So as we get into the ALICE presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the protocols for the school itself. We're going to talk about the elements of ALICE that we can use inside of each one of our environments, whether it's the school, whether it's a college campus, whether it's Walmart, the mall, wherever. This is going to be universal for that. We're going to go over situational awareness, how to alert, and what we would talk about when we're alerting, who we would call, and how we communicate with each other. We're also going to talk about the informed portion of it, which you may remember from last year. And we're also going to talk about our drills when it comes to evacuating, shelter, secure, lockdown. We're going to talk about all of those and which one would be appropriate in what situation. We're also going to go in depth on how to counter. Now, in years past, we came out to the schools, we set up mats, we did takedowns with each other, we threw the green balls at each other. We're going to show you some videos since I'm not able to be there in person and be hands-on. So, situational awareness, let's talk about what that is. It's a matter of your perception. Your perception of your environment, what you're seeing in your environment, and then how you would react to what's in your environment. So you think about that gut instinct you have. When you feel like something's just not right, that's what we're going to be going into detail about. What do I do when I feel like something just isn't right? So Cooper's Color Code of Awareness teaches us a couple of different things. Now what I want you to know before I give you an explanation of each one, you never want to be in the white and you never want to be in the black. Okay? Never in the white, never in the black. And you're going to see why. In our environment, when we're at work or when we're out shopping or at the store or even just running around town, you never want to be any lower than yellow. So white is when you're sitting at home watching Netflix on your couch in your pajamas with your front door locked. White is that environment where you don't feel like there's any threat to you and nothing could harm you. We don't want to be in that particular phase when we're at work. The problem is you're unaware and you're unprepared, which means things will sneak up on you. So think about kids and teachers alike, right? You're walking through the school and you have your earbuds in, or you're looking down at your cell phone, or you're in the break room playing on your laptop. You are not aware of your surroundings, which means something could sneak up on you. Many times we walked through a school hallway and I've bumped into a kid who's texting on their cell phone or doing whatever on their cell phone, had no idea I was even in the hallway. That's not where we want to be. Where we want to be is in level yellow. Level yellow is where we are aware and we are alert. We're making eye contact with people as we walk by. We know what's going on around us. We know who just popped in and out of a particular classroom. We know what vehicle just pulled up into the front. That's the level we want to be in. Looking around us, knowing our particular situation. Level orange is when that level yellow moved. That environment that looked normal, those kids passing by or that vehicle pulling up, somehow changes. Now I have a sense of danger. I have that gut instinct that something's not right. I feel like something has gone wrong, but I'm not quite sure what it is. This is where we're going to heighten our situational awareness and start really paying attention to the details. What did I see? Was it kids running down the hallway? Was it a particular individual that didn't look right to me? Or an individual that was carrying something that didn't look right? And this is where the communication begins. When we get into level red, that means we now know that there's a threat and we are responding to it, whether that's a particular protocol, whether we're in Walmart or we're evacuating, or whether we're inside of our school and we're getting ready to either secure or lock down. We need to know what it is we're going to do, and we need to communicate that to everyone on that campus so that they can all respond accordingly with the information available to them. Level black. No one should ever be at level black. Level black is a failure to plan, an absolute failure to plan. In level black, the picture on the left, they paid for that. That's a scare room. So those kids paid to be that afraid. But look at the picture on the right. So we have two ladies that are hiding behind the desk. One of them is prepared for that situation. She's alert. She's looking around. She's looking over the top of the desk or through the desk, waiting for that threat to get to her. She's armed herself with a weapon. It's an improvised weapon, which is an umbrella, and she is ready, waiting for see if that threat's going to enter that room. The other lady, on the other hand, is not prepared at all. She is terrified. She's closed her eyes. She's hiding underneath the desk. No improvised weapons and no awareness of her surroundings whatsoever. In that situation, one of them will survive that. The other one will just huddle up in a ball and hope for the best. And we'll talk about how that doesn't work when we take a look at the Virginia Tech shooting. So, we talk about being alert. We talk about using our senses. We have to use our senses to determine what's going on around us, what's right and what's wrong. Those senses you can get that from a myriad of different things. You might smell something that's off. You might see something. You might hear something. Pick up a text message. There's a lot of different ways your body's going to pick up on information that's going to tell you something about this situation is not right. Now that the school and the UNM campus and a couple other places are moving to apps, you're going to get those alerts via a text message. And that's going to tell you something isn't right. You're going to take that information to implement a plan for yourself, your surroundings, and whoever you're tasked with. So the school's protocols are as follows. Now, it's not just Gallup McKinley County School. City of Gallup, County of McKinley, GMCS have all adopted these particular protocols. These have been mailed out. These have been sent to parents. These have been posted in both of the newspapers. This should be common knowledge for everyone. Many years ago, they used to say that you can't use these protocols, you can't speak in plain English, you have to use codes because you might tell the bad guy what you're doing. We've learned over and over and over again from active shooter situations, you won't teach the bad guy anything. Aztec High School shooting, the bad guy attended high school there, he knew the layout there, he knew when the doors were unlocked, he knew how to get into the school, knew the layout, knew their protocols, knew everything about that particular school because he was a student 3 years prior. When he got in, they had a protocol, and they were able to protect almost all of their students from harm. There was 2 students that were shot and killed in the Aztec High School shooting. One was in a bathroom, and the other one was in a hallway, common areas. We're going to talk about not being in common areas. But the bad guy couldn't get to anyone else inside the school, even though he knew the layout, the protocols, the plans, and when the doors would be unlocked. He couldn't get to anyone because of protocols similar to this. So the first protocol is called a hold. A hold should not alarm anyone, not inside the school, not outside the school. A hold is when we have, let's say, a fight in the hallway, or a student has been injured. We need to put him on a gurney and get him out to medical attention. But what we don't want to happen is we don't want classes to change or all the students to flush out of the classroom into the common areas. So we call for a hold. Once that situation's been resolved, we put them all back inside of their classrooms or let them out of the classrooms or they can move freely. We have a secure. A secure means that the threat is outside the building and we need to secure ourselves inside the building by locking the doors, closing off the windows, making sure whatever that threat was cannot get inside the building to us. A lockdown is the opposite. That means the threat got inside the building, whatever building we're inside of, and we now need to compartmentalize. We need to move into small classrooms, lockable areas, bathrooms, janitor's closets, anywhere that we can lock ourselves and put a barrier between us and the bad guy so that we can barricade the doors and keep ourselves safe from whatever that threat is. An evacuate means that we got to get out. In a school setting, this is going to be rare. We're not going to flush everybody outside. Think about the Parkland, Florida shooting back in 2019. In Parkland, the issue that they had was someone pulled the fire alarm. And when they tripped the fire alarm, where did everybody go? Outside. When everybody flushed outside, they had no idea that the shooter had made his way to a second floor, broken out a window of the school, and used it as a sniper perch. So what he was doing was laying down fire and shooting people in the parking lot, the sidewalk, and the adjacent street. So when we talk about evacuating, especially in a school setting, that should be slow and methodical. If we swing that door open and we hear shots fired or see people running and screaming, we're not going to evacuate. We're going to abandon that protocol, pull everyone back inside of the school where we can lock down or secure and be safe. So shelter. Shelter, for the most part, is used for weather-related incidents. Let's say we had a lightning storm or hail or whatever was going on outside. It was weather-related. We just wanted the kids inside when we would call shelter. The difference between your evacuate and shelter, one, we're pushing everybody inside the building. The other one, we're pushing everyone outside the building. Either way, it needs to be slow and methodical. We need to keep people in order. We need to keep people slow from running. And more commonly than not, when somebody pulls a fire alarm, you're going to see everybody run. And that's not what we want to see. We want to see it done in an orderly fashion so we can recall those kids if it's appropriate to do so. All right, so let's test this out real quick. In the event that we had a weather-related incident on the outside of the school, what protocol would we use? That's correct, a shelter. We're going to shelter inside the building away from whatever the weather-related incident is outside. Now, what if we had a fight in the hallway, or we had a student that was injured and we needed to get medical attention and we didn't want everyone to flush out of the classrooms into common areas? What protocol would we use? Correct, a hold. We're going to put everyone inside their classrooms and we're going to keep them there until that's been dealt with or the students have been moved to another location. Then we call the all clear and everyone's free to move about in the common areas. Remember, a hold should not cause a panic for students, teachers, or parents. A hold is just a precautionary measure. All right, now, what if the building burns down, we have a gas leak, or God forbid, the building comes crumbling to the ground? What is the appropriate thing to do? Evacuate. We're going to get everyone out of the school safely in an orderly fashion at the nearest exits using the protocol that you're practicing as you're drilling throughout the semesters. All right, so here's where most of the confusion comes into play. So all too often we hear the word lockdown. Lockdown means the threat's inside the building with us. If the threat is outside the building, we saw someone with a gun, or we saw a threat, or there was a fight, an intoxicated person out front, and we didn't want everyone to go outside, then what is the appropriate protocol? Correct. We're going to secure everyone inside the building. We're going to lock our doors, close the windows, and we're going to protect ourselves from the threat that is outside by keeping everyone inside. For those of you that have multiple building campuses, this may be something that you're going to want to keep everyone secure inside their own buildings. It doesn't mean that they all have to move to one building to secure. You can secure in multiple buildings around the campus. For that matter, even when you have a lockdown in one building, you could still be securing in another. Remember, a lockdown means the threat is inside the building with you. You can still secure in other buildings surrounding it, keeping the threat from getting inside the building you're in on your campus. All right, so in the event that the bad guy gets in the building with you and it's time to compartmentalize, what is the correct protocol? Correct. We're going to lock down. Lock, light, out of sight. Locking our doors, we're going to barricade those. We'll talk about that extensively here in a few minutes. We're going to get rid of our lighting if it's appropriate. We'll talk about that as well. And then we need to make sure that we are not in common areas like the gymnasium, the cafeteria, bathrooms that don't lock, hallways that you can't secure yourself in. We want to get compartmentalized. We want a solid barrier between us and whatever the threat is so that the threat cannot get to us. We would lock it down. All right, so make sure, if you do not already, make sure you have a copy of these protocols. You know them, you understand them, and you know what you would do in the event you heard one of these protocols come out over an intercom, a PA, or via text message. What would you do in your environment? Be thinking about that as we go through our counter strategies, our lockdown and barricade strategies. What would you do in your particular environment? The other thing that law enforcement has done to try to assist you to get there faster and to get good communication within the building is our school liaisons have gone to all 34 Gallup McKinley County campuses and the BIE campuses within McKinley County, and we've collected phone numbers and floor plans for each one of those schools. If you have not already provided your updated 3-deep information to the district, please make sure that you do that. If someone on that list changes, make sure you update the district on that. The reason for this list is so that law enforcement can call you on your cell phone inside the building in the event of an emergency. We can get real-time updates about what's going on. All right, so the information that you're going to provide, remember we're moving through our situational awareness. We were in yellow, and then we saw something that didn't look right, so we moved to orange. We realized what we were seeing wasn't right, and we moved to red, and now we're activating a protocol, which means we need to get resources to us, and we need to communicate inside whatever building we are in. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to use whatever protocol is appropriate. Was the threat outside? If it was outside, we're calling it secure, and we're letting everyone know we're insecure. The threat got inside with us, then we're going to do a lockdown. We're letting everyone know. But somebody needs to call outside of the school and get resources headed your way via 911 or a dispatch center that's closest to your school, so we can contact and get law enforcement, ambulances, whatever those resources are, headed your particular direction. Know and understand that more than one protocol can occur at one time. So we talked about multiple buildings on a campus where one building where the threat got inside was in lockdown, and the other buildings surrounding it are insecure, keeping the threat outside. We'll also talk about how we can do that inside of one big room, for instance, a gymnasium where we might have a ball game. More than one protocol is going to be happening at one time. You need to know what the existing communication system is inside your school. Are we talking via text, PA system, phones, an intercom, radios? What is the form of communication we're using so that everyone knows? Communication is normally always the problem in these situations. The problem that we see most often is either somebody didn't have a radio or the PA didn't reach a particular part of the school. That's what we're testing when we do these drills. You got to test these protocols and know that they're going to work. When you're sending information to the outside world, we need to be talking about very specific things. You need to tell law enforcement who you are, where you're at, what information you know. Did you see the shooter? Did you see what kind of gun they were carrying? Was it a handgun? Was it a rifle? What information can you tell us that would help us prepare for that incident? The same thing's going to happen inside the school. When you're communicating over the intercom or text messages or the radios, you need all that information to go to as many people as possible so that they can prepare in their environment. We need the location where you're at. You need to tell other people where you're at so we know where to find you. You also need to tell them what you saw. For instance, if I was going to call out a lockdown over the intercom, it's not just lockdown, 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 and then that's it. That's not a lot of information. We're going to say that an intruder entered through the front doors wearing all black, carrying a rifle. Then lockdown, 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 or vice versa. But if you don't give us all that information, we don't know how to plan in our particular classroom for what's coming. We don't know where it is in the building, and we don't know what it is we're preparing for. The more you can provide, the better. So, in the event of an evacuation, and remember, for a school campus, evacuation shouldn't be your go-to protocol. In the event that there's a threat in the parking lot or outside, ideally, we want to remain inside the building, securing ourselves so that we can stay safe from the threat, giving law enforcement time to get there and neutralize that threat before it ever gets to us. In the event that you're going to evacuate, We're going to talk about a couple of things that you need to do. First, neat and orderly fashion. Remember that tip. When we break out one of those doors or we break out a window to evacuate, we need to be looking around outside. What have we heard and what have we seen? If we saw shots fired or we saw people running and screaming, we're going to do a double take on that and say, hey, maybe it's not safe outside. We're going to pull everyone back inside and move to a secure protocol. We're going to talk about a go bucket or a go bag, and I'll show you some photos. This is not something that the district provides. This is something we've seen from teachers. We were taught through our Alice instructorship, and then in some of the schools that we've taught on the BIE side of things, they're already preparing by having these go buckets and go bags ready. Remember, you're going to leave all your belongings behind when you leave. I know it's painful, it's difficult, but you have to leave your belongings behind because once law enforcement engages with you, they're going to have you drop those belongings anyway so that we can make sure that any of those individuals we're talking with are not the threat. Once you're outside the building, we need to go to our rally point or reunification point, but you need to make sure you know where you're going. Don't just flush out of the school and start running around. That's not going to help anyone. We need to know where we're going and how we're getting there. Think about 2 rally points, one that you can walk to and one that you can be bused to. Remember, those buses aren't just going to instantaneously be there in the event of an emergency. You're going to have a rally point that you can walk to keep everyone safe, and then one where the buses pick you up and move you off of the campus to a safe location. Once you're to that rally point or reunification point, make sure you're taking attendance. We need to make sure we have no students missing, no staff is missing. We need to be communicating with the campus via radio or phone to make sure everyone has made it to the rally point. In the event that this actually happens and parents start to get to the rally point and you turn around and look for their kid and can't find him and you tell that parent, I don't know where your kid is, you think they're going to be all right with that? No. No, they're going to be extremely upset. They're going to turn around and tell the group of parents behind them, you don't know where our kid is. They don't know where our children are. And you're going to have a whole bunch of angry parents, and you're not going to be able to control that situation. So take attendance, know who you have, and know who you're still looking for. All right, I know the font and print on this one is a little small and blurry, but we're going to go through the items that you would keep inside of a go bucket. What I want you to be thinking about is if you are doing something similar to this, think about duct tape and rope and some other items that might help you barricade your door. When we get into that, you'll see why that might matter. Inside of those go buckets, and you might say that yellow bucket looks a whole lot like a toilet. Well, it is. It's a makeshift toilet made out of a Home Depot bucket. When we were training in Omak, Washington, with the Colville Indian tribe, they already had all of this stuff in their schools. So these are makeshift toilets. Inside of there are first aid kits, flashlights, phone chargers, bottles of water, all kinds of stuff that they have prepared in the event that they end up locked into their classroom for several hours. What would I do if I was stuck in my classroom for several hours? What items might I need? The other thing you can see on the left-hand side of the slide are go bags. These are medical bags or get-ready kits, and you can see that they're very brightly colored. This would not look like a normal backpack as it's leaving the school or as it's inside your classroom. It would be easy to know what that was. So this particular go bucket we found in district. One of the teachers provided us these photos, which we appreciate. And inside of her go bucket is a tarp, some wipes, first aid kit, duct tape, a whole bunch of other stuff. And you might say, well, why a tarp? Well, if we're making a makeshift bathroom in our classroom, we're going to need a tarp to put in the corner of the room that we can tack up to the wall. We can put the bucket behind for some level of privacy. Now, we're not asking you to make a camping world out of your classroom. That's not what we're asking. But we're throwing out some ideas that might be helpful to what you might be able to do inside your classroom to be better prepared. Some of the items we've seen inside of go buckets as we traveled around were trail mix, beef jerky, bottled water, phone chargers. We even found kitty litter in one of the kits. Well, what would you use kitty litter for? To put in the bucket that's now your makeshift toilet in the corner to keep the odor down. We've seen lots of very unique things in these go buckets as we've traveled around. So let's talk about that lockdown. How do we affect the lockdown? If we heard lockdown, 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 there's an intruder inside the building with us. Now what do we do? What is your plan? What's your strategy inside your classroom, inside whatever room you're in? What are you going to do? So let's talk about what some other folks did that might help you get a good idea of what would help you in a lockdown situation. What you're looking at on the slide is 6 classrooms from the Virginia Tech shooting. This is on the 2nd floor of Virginia Tech. And the other thing you need to remember is that those classrooms are unlocked. They're locked up after they're cleaned at the end of each day and unlocked by the janitorial staff in the morning. So these classrooms are all unlocked. None of the students or staff have keys to any of these doors. Our bad guy enters the second floor from the left-hand side of the slide, goes up to the top left-hand corner, which is an empty room. There's no one inside of that classroom. What do you suppose our bad guy, who's armed with a rifle, trying to kill and injure as many people as he can, what do you suppose he does with an empty classroom? Just moves on, right? Just moves to the next classroom. Well, by this time, the middle classroom on the top side knows that there's a threat, and all they do is get down on the floor and close their eyes and hope for the best. That was their plan of action, to get on the floor, close their eyes, and hope for the best. Well, it didn't work out real well, because remember, that door was unlocked. Bad guy breaches into that middle classroom, opens fire on the classroom, killing and injuring all but 2 students inside of that classroom. That's called a passive approach. That's when we don't have a plan and we don't do anything to be ready for that threat that's headed our direction. So let's take a look at room 204 on the top right-hand corner of your screen. Room 204 has Professor Librescu in it. Now, he's an Auschwitz survivor. He is not going down without a fight. They hear the gunfire that's happening in the room next to them, and they create a plan of action. This is called a proactive approach. Their plan of action was to barricade the door physically. So Professor Librescu and one of the other students physically barricaded the door, while the other students began lowering each other down out the second floor window. Now, what you see on the slide here is Rama High School. It's the only one I found in district with an opening second floor window. But if you can imagine this mentally, that you're going to jump from that second floor onto the sidewalk below, it's a terrifying thought. Well, that's exactly what happened inside of the classroom. They were able to get 14 students to safety. But a few of those students could not make that second floor jump. The threat that was behind them, which was gunfire, overwhelmed them, but not enough to say, hey, I can jump from a second floor window. So eventually our bad guy breaches into room 204, killing Professor Librescu and the other student that were physically holding the door shut, and then he manages to get 2 other victims inside that room. Those were the 2 students who could not make it out that second floor window. So in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see the same passive approach again. So they hear gunfire, they know it's coming for them, and they do the same thing, scary movie syndrome. They just get on the floor, close their eyes, and hope for the best. No barricades, no plan of action, no plan to counter the threat once he gets inside the room, just hoping for the best. Bad guy breaches, gets inside the classroom, killing and injuring all but 1 student. Let's move to the middle of the bottom, room 207. This particular room is very interesting in that something happened in there that confused everyone. Now, we've taught for years. This is my 5th year teaching Alice for the schools, and we've learned and taught, do not open the door for anyone. Do not open the door for anyone. That's what happened in room 207. In room 207, they hear a knock at the door. Let me in, please let me in. It's another student. It's someone they recognize, someone they know is standing on the outside. Someone inside that classroom makes the decision to swing that door open and try to bring that student into the classroom. The bad guy hears that commotion, points the firearm down the hallway, shoots and kills that student whose lifeless body falls into the door jamb, propping it open. Now they can't get the door resecured, and the threat is running right toward their classroom. Gets into that particular classroom, and once inside of there, kills and injures all but 2 students. Those 2 students then make the decision, not before, but now they make the decision, they should use the furniture inside the classroom to barricade after the bad guy left. When should they have made the decision to barricade that door? Before the bad guy got there. Not after he already got in, killing and injuring the majority of the people inside of that room. So let's take this to room 205, bottom right-hand side of your screen. Room 205, they did a great job. They had a plan. They heard gunfire coming inside of the hallways. They knew or thought it might be coming for them. They used the furniture and what else they had inside the classroom to barricade that door so the bad guy could not get in. The bad guy tried to make entry, was unsuccessful, and moved on to another portion of the school, therefore saving every life inside of room 205. So when we talk about passive versus proactive, you can see that there's a huge difference between what we do inside those classrooms versus doing nothing at all. So when you're locking it down, the first thing we need to know is we have to control the door. We're preventing the bad guy from getting to us. So we're going to talk about how we control the door. The other thing we need to do is we need to control the room. Everyone that's inside of the room, the environment, and what we're doing in there needs to be controlled. So we're going to talk about how to control the door and how to control the room. So the first thing we need to do is once we're into that lockdown phase, we're inside of our classroom or whatever area could be locked, we need to secure the windows and we need to figure out what we're going to do with the light. So if your door has a window in it, we need to cover it with something, okay? It needs to be covered. If the bad guy can look in the window and see you, then they're probably going to shoot at that door or shoot at those walls and try to gain entry to you. There's more than a 50% chance that if the bad guy cannot see in there and doesn't hear any commotion, the bad guy will pass by and go somewhere different. So whatever you got to do to use, or whatever you have to use to try to get it covered, do that. Whether it could be a tablecloth, paper. Some of you guys have seen the blackout shades that we have, right? So there's a blackout shade that you can use. Fire code states that you cannot cover the door in more than 20% flammable material, right? So I can't cover more than 20% of that door in flammable material. So we've seen some teachers that use these window shades. There's 3M tape on the back, and it's just a window shade that's being held in the window with a clip. You pull the clip, and your window's closed in less than half of a second. Okay, so that's something quick, simple, it doesn't violate fire code, and it can prevent the bad guy from seeing into your particular environment. If you have Venetian blinds that have shades, we recommend that you keep those shades closed and use the turnstile to allow light in. The reason for that is if you try to grab those 3 strings and yank on them and you hope that that Venetian blind is going to fall perfect, it won't, I promise. Those strings will get tangled, you'll find yourself tangled up with it. It'll never close quickly and in a hurry. You'll end up dealing with the window instead of dealing with the students inside of your classroom. Now when we talk about lights, think about your campus. You have to know your campus very well. Do you have light sensors in your room? Meaning that if you walk around in the room, do the lights turn on? If you leave the room for 20 minutes, do the lights turn off automatically? If that happens, then don't physically turn off the lights, knowing that if one of the students moves inside the classroom, the lights will just come back on. That blinking light in the hallway tells the bad guy what? That there is someone there, and they're going to target your particular classroom. So, if you can, you want the lights off. If you know that you can't because of sensors, we're going to leave them on so that we do not draw the bad guy to our area. Remember that if your light switches are outside the classroom, which we've seen in a few schools, you do not leave the safety of your classroom to turn that light off. You're going to leave it as is, stay locked down inside your classroom, you're going to cover those windows so the bad guy can't see in, and you're going to leave the lights as they are. Never leave the cover of safety in order to try to turn off the light switch. Think about what we talked about last year when we were talking about the Uvalde shooting. One of the teachers realized, right, so they see the bad guy walking around outside the school armed with a rifle. And that signifies to them, hey, we need to go to secure. For them, it was lockdown. Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. There's a shooter outside of the building. So as they do that, one of the teachers realizes, hey, we left a door propped open at the end of one of the hallways. So she runs to the end of the hallway and kicks that block out from underneath of the door, closes the door, and then runs back to safety. Do you guys remember how the bad guy got in Uvalde? Through an unlocked door. That door was not locked. All of that she put herself in the middle of harm's way was for nothing because the door was unlocked. Remember, in Uvalde, 3 doors were unlocked on that campus. The bad guy didn't even have to work at getting in. He just walked right into the classroom, or right into the school. All right, so we talk about these locked and unlocked doors. It is extremely important that you know that your campus is secure, that the doors are secure, okay? They should only be able to get in through the front if you've buzzed them in. Take a look at this on this slide with the picture on the left. The HVAC system was not working that particular day, so they propped it open using one of the volleyball poles to get some air inside of the gym. When we went to do our walkthroughs, do you suppose that we walked in and buzzed ourselves in through the front door? Nope. We walked right into the gymnasium where there was kids playing. Now this is not only for active threats, guys. This is for intoxicated people. If you have a custodial dispute going on, you don't want the wrong parent showing up, popping in a back door, grabbing the kid and leaving. And the first time we know we're missing a kid is at 3:15 when we let out for school and the parent's there and we can't find their child. There's a lot of different scenarios where that could play out with unlocked and unsecured doors. The picture on the right, this is they're waiting for the Cisco truck. Okay? So they're waiting for a food delivery. Well, that's a really big door, and it's propped open, and anybody could have come and gone. So do you think we went in through the front? No. We went straight to the cafeteria to find out what we were having for lunch that day. So when you are doing your secure protocols, when you're doing your walkthroughs, when your safety team is doing checkups, make sure that the exterior of the building is always secure. More specifically, when you're in a protocol like secure or lockdown, we need to absolutely know that all of those doors are locked and all the windows are locked and secured so that the threat can't just walk in on us. We are preparing, we're giving ourselves time to prepare for the threat. We're giving law enforcement time to get to our school. If these protocols aren't followed, you're going to find yourself standing next to a threat instead of preparing for it and trying to secure it outside. All right, so let's talk about what we do with our doors. What do I do with the door when I'm in a lockdown? Remember, we have two different kinds of doors. There's doors that open out and doors that open in. The large majority of your campuses are going to have doors that open out because that's fire code. We have to be able to evacuate the kids out of the school as quickly as possible. So for the majority of you that have doors that open out, you can't just stick a desk in front of it and hope for the best. Okay, that's not going to work. The door's just going to swing open to the outside, and you're going to find yourself standing with a threat. So let's talk about what we can do with those doors that open out, which is the majority of your classrooms. If it opens in, it's no big deal. You take big furniture in the classroom, you move it in front of the door, and it can't open. But for those doors that open out, I want you to take a look at this particular slide. Now, these are barricades that are approved. We'll talk about some stuff that's not approved, but this is what's approved. You can use the furniture inside the classroom to barricade that door physically. Covering the entire door jamb works well. Even if the door pulls out, the bad guy would have to try to climb over or push everything out of the way. This gives you additional time to prepare and to think about how you're going to counter. One of the videos I'm going to show you here in just a few seconds is how to tie up that door. Okay, that would be more specific. If we used an extension cord and a table, we could tie the door. That'd be very quick. We also saw on the right-hand side of the screen, one of the teachers used a chair to jam inside the door handle and underneath the light switch. Worked very well, but you have to practice it and know that it works. You can also use a belt, a tourniquet, piece of rope, something else to secure the door closing device, which you see on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. By tying that up, it will keep the door from opening. That works like a scissor jack, and if it's tied up, it can't split open. It would keep the door from opening more than an inch or two. And the other thing we've seen is some folks use fire hose. So this is more common in the BIE schools that have fire houses on campus. They take their old fire hose, cut it into 12-inch pieces, and they slide that over the door closing device to keep it from opening. That's not so you can take a nap and keep away from the administrators. That is only to be used in the event of an emergency.
Okay, so what we're doing here is we're going to take a table, we're going to move the table in front of the door. The table needs to be wider than the door so that it can't go out as the door opens. We're going to take the end of an extension cord and we're going to tie it around the door handle. Wrap around twice, and then we're going to tie it in a knot and pull it as tight as we can. From there, we're going to take the rest of that extension cord, move our table out a little bit, pull as nice as tight as we can up against the wall, and then wrap around, 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 and around, okay? You can then either tie that off or just let that hang and let the friction of the extension cord do the work. And what this should do is, even if they have a master key, it's going to make this door handle very difficult to turn, and even if they can turn it, we're only going to get about an inch of open, and they're not going to be able to get through that doorway. Okay?
Okay, so even if you don't have a long extension cord, so let's say you don't have a 25-foot extension cord, well, remember that go bucket. Think about maybe some duct tape or a short rope or a short extension cord. You can use a short extension cord and tie it to the leg of the table and then tie it to the door handle, and it works just the same, and you don't need a long extension cord. The other thing we've seen people do is improvise, right? You could use a broom handle. You could use a crutch. We were working in a nursing station or a nurse's station down in Phoenix when we were doing analysis training. The only thing we could find to block the door was a crutch. So we used some shoelaces and we tied the crutch to the door handle, and we just propped the crutch up so it couldn't fall and spin in the doorway. And we were able to secure it and completely barricade it, even though we weren't familiar with that particular environment. So be thinking about what you would do to barricade your door. So these are devices you can't use. Now please understand that there are violations of fire code that can occur, and we don't want that to happen. But in the event of an emergency, you do what you have to do to make sure that you and your students remain safe and you can lock yourself in the classroom. Okay? Don't worry about the fire code in the event of an active shooter situation. But for our day-to-day operations, we need to keep in mind that on this particular slide, we cannot use devices that are bolted to the door, or that would be a secondary lock on the door itself that would prevent students from being able to get out in the event of a fire emergency. Okay, but remember, in the event of a real emergency, you do what you have to do. Don't be thinking about this in that moment. Be thinking about how to keep you and your students safe. All right, so once we've got that door controlled, now what do we do inside the classroom? Well, we need to spread out within the room. We don't all want to be huddled up in a little ball, okay? Think about the Aztec High School shooting. Remember, the bad guy gets to one of the classrooms. The substitute teacher did not have keys to her classroom, so they had to physically barricade the door using furniture. Inside of that particular classroom, they knew that they had made some noise, right? So they had to get away from the door, away from the walls. Remember, the majority of your walls, if they're not made of brick, they're made of sheetrock. If they're made of sheetrock, bullets are going to come zinging through it. It is not safe to stand behind the wall. It is not safe to stand behind a window. It's not safe to stand behind a door. So what they did in Aztec High School is they all moved to the center of the room and got flat on the floor. The bad guy had identified that there was somebody inside of that classroom. And so he takes the firearm and he opens fire on the wall. The bullets went in about shoulder height and they exited the wall about knee height. Well, where were all the students? They were laying flat on the floor in the middle of the classroom. And all the bullets went over the top. No one inside of that classroom was injured. So you do have to have a good plan for what you're going to do inside the classroom. Maybe there's a safe corner of the classroom that's very specific that you feel is like far enough away from the door that you could keep your students safe. But we need to remain attentive and we need to know what we're going to do inside that classroom. If you had your go bucket or a go bag or some items that you would want for that particular situation, make sure you have identified where that is and get it near you. Some people even keep improvised weapons inside of that go bucket. Fire extinguishers would be one of those. All right, so let's talk about that counter strategy, right? So we were barricaded inside of our classroom, but somehow the threat got to us. Or maybe we couldn't get into a particular classroom or environment and get barricaded. So now we're in an area where the bad guy is, and now we've got to find a way to counter. So in our counter strategies, we're going to talk about how to distract, okay? There's distraction techniques and there's control techniques. The first thing we want to do is distract the bad guy. Then we want to control the bad guy. Okay, we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. So when we talk about the distraction side of things, remember what we're trying to do is overwhelm the bad guy's decision-making behavior by choosing to act first. The other thing that we want to do is make sure that we either improvise the weapon, right? So we have something to throw, or we're going to scream. You'll see in the videos here in a few minutes where they throw stuff at the bad guy while screaming at the bad guy, and it causes them to get distracted. We have, in human nature, we get afraid, right? We react to things. It's instinct. If we can trigger that, we can own the next couple of seconds as the bad guy tries to get to us. So you guys might remember from last year, we talked about the OODA loop. I don't know if anybody remembers what OODA stands for, but it stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. For those of you that trained with us in the last couple of years, you would probably remember the green ball trick, right? So what we do is we set that up where somebody's twice the height as the other person, and we tell them to go for the ball at the same time. The person who makes the decision to go for the ball first always wins, regardless of strength, gender, age, or anything else. It's all about making the decision to act first. Colonel Boyd from the United States Air Force learned this back in the 1950s during dogfights. They were losing airplane fights when it was one-on-one. Somebody would go right, the bad guy would go right, and then we would go right. And the bad guy would go left, and we would go left. We were always one step behind. Colonel Boyd figured out that if we made the decision to act first, the other person had to react to us. And that's what we're doing in these counter strategies. We're using the element of surprise, we're using our OODA loop principle, and we're using distraction techniques to take control of an armed assailant, even though we have no gun on us. So remember, it stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. Great example of this is you're driving in traffic. The person in front of you slams on their brakes. Do your brakes just magically apply themselves? No. So what happens is your mind, your eye, sees that brake light come on, and you go, oh no. You've got to tell your brain, to tell your leg, to tell your foot, to take your foot off the gas and put it on the brake pedal so we don't hit the person in front of us. Well, that doesn't happen instantaneously. It takes between a second and a half for that to occur. That's the time frame we're going to use to take advantage of the bad guy, while the bad guy is figuring out how to react to us. So, we're going to talk about using the element of surprise when the bad guy comes through the door. And you'll see in these next couple of videos, that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to use the door frame, the door jamb, to surprise the bad guy. They won't know that we're there. Most of these shootings, the bad guy doesn't expect anyone to fight back. Statistically speaking, the bad guy has no expectation that any of us will fight back. That's where we're going to take advantage. We're going to use control techniques like taking control of the arms and the legs, and you'll see that in the video that's coming up here shortly.
So all I'm going to do is just run through that doorway. You guys ready? Okay. So all I'm going to do is run through it.
Ooh.
I'm good. I'm fine.
All right, so you saw what she did there. She used the side of the firearm that always works. So the first thing was, the beginning of the blue mat was symbolizing a doorway, okay? And so as it symbolizes the doorway, they're hiding on either side of it. They're going to grab, each one's going to grab a limb. 2 grab arms, 2 grab legs, and once the legs are controlled, the bad guy has nowhere to go but down. You all have heard the saying, to save face. That means we don't want to hit on the asphalt or anything else and bust up our face, so my hands immediately go up in front of me, which renders the firearm up in the air. So once they get me down on the ground, she takes the firearm and she uses the side of the gun that always works, okay? This side of the gun. So you say, well, why can't I just take the firearm and point it at the bad guy and pull the trigger? Well, what if the trigger goes click? What if it wasn't loaded? What if the magazine's not seated correctly? What if the safety's on? What if they haven't put a round in the chamber? There could be a myriad of different things that are wrong with this particular firearm. The other thing that could happen, and we used to demonstrate this when we came around to all of your schools, is we give you guys a Nerf gun, right? And so your task would be is to try to shoot the bad guy with the Nerf gun. In those piles of people like that, half the time, more than half the time, teachers end up getting shot with the Nerf gun instead of the bad guy. And so that's why we wouldn't just pick up the gun, turn it around, and try to shoot the bad guy. This end always worked, so she was going to use it for the head or the groin area and render the bad guy unconscious. All right, he was supposed to go down on the mat, but as you can see, he didn't. So what happened is somebody popped out a little bit too early, and our fake bad guy saw the person coming. So once they got control of his feet, you saw it, right? He's running backwards with the cap gun, running backwards, which isn't an advantage for the bad guy. So he might have got off a couple of rounds, but it wouldn't have been accurate, and it likely wouldn't have been lethal. Once they get control of his legs, you saw the whole thing. Boom, down to the ground they go. Okay? Take a look at this next video. All right, we're using the element of surprise. So this was training down in the Phoenix area, and the guy that that ran in with the Nerf gun, that was a law enforcement officer with years of experience, and still he was distracted by the fact that they threw the green balls at him and everybody started screaming. He did not know that they would be there planned to attack. His job was to go into the cafeteria area with a Nerf gun and shoot as many people as he could. The people inside the cafeteria were told to make a plan of attack and be prepared at both of the entrances to this cafeteria that a bad guy may enter. Having a plan does work, regardless of the training that the bad guy has. Take a look at this next video. All right, this one's kind of fun, right? All right, so that guy's, the trainer there is wearing a padded suit from head to toe, except for in 2 places. I'll let you guess where that was. So obviously, he really did get hurt in this particular scenario, but she used the element of surprise. So what she did is she waited for the barrel of the gun to come through the door. So as the barrel comes through, that's what she identifies. She grabs a hold of that before the bad guy even gets in and pushes it straight up in the air. Now, if we have an accidental discharge, where does the round go? Right? Into the ceiling instead of into students and staff. Once she's got it in the upright position, she just starts smashing it into him over and over again until she can get it free. He falls down, and she renders him unconscious by hitting him in the head or the groin area. Okay? All right, so now we attack the bad guy. We got him down. We got the firearm away. What do we do with the firearm? Well, the last thing you want to do with the firearm is be wandering around the school carrying it, because then who does law enforcement think you are? You get mistaken for the bad guy. So we have to do something with the firearm. We don't want children to get a hold of it. We don't want the bad guy to get it again, that's for sure. So what are we going to do with that particular firearm once we get it? We need to secure it in a safe location. We could put it in a dumpster, throw a jacket or a blanket over it, and lock it in a particular closet. If it's a small handgun, maybe we lock it in a drawer of one of the desks, or we lock that up in a closet as well. You don't want the bad guy to get it. You don't want your students to get it and have an accidental discharge that harms one of them or one of their fellow classmates. But we do need to get it out of the bad guy's line of sight, line of access. So once we get it locked up, make sure that somebody tells law enforcement where it was, right? So let's say one of these terrible scenarios goes down, but you guys end up being the heroes. Nobody gets hurt. Bad guy goes to jail. Fast forward to Saturday, you're sitting on your couch watching Netflix, and you're like, I wonder if I told any of the cops where I put that gun. And we're still wandering around the campus looking for that firearm, okay? Make sure if you were the one that hid the firearm, or you know where the firearm has been hidden or placed, you let a law enforcement officer know so we can go secure that. We're going to use it for fingerprints if we didn't know who our bad guy was, a bunch of other things, so we need that firearm. We don't want to leave it on campus. Make sure that you don't hold the weapon in your hand if at all possible. Pick it up with, a sweater or a t-shirt or something like that. What we don't want to land is we don't want you to remove the DNA that could be on there, right? So there'd be touch DNA, which is dead skin cells, fingerprints possibly, depending on how the firearm is shaped and what it's made out of. So you want to handle it with care if you can, one, for the safety of yourself, and two, to preserve any evidence that might be on it. And you want to control the weapon by placing it into a container or a locked area, as we just spoke about. All right. With that said, since most of you folks are online, I think we're going to skip the question sessions today. But I hope that was helpful. I hope that you can go back to your particular classroom environment and put this to use. Think about what you're going to do when you barricade. And remember, the saying that we used last semester was the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing. But the worst thing that you can do is nothing. To have not prepared, to have not planned, and to not know what's going to happen if one of these terrible events takes place on your campus. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope you all have a safe time, and we appreciate what you do for our children and our grandchildren in our communities.